The eviction notice felt like sandpaper between my trembling fingers. 72 hours. That's all I had left before the locks changed on the only home my daughter had ever known. I stood in the doorway of my apartment, watching the August sun bleed through the curtains, painting everything the color of endings. The paper crinkled as my grip tightened, and somewhere in the distance, a door slammed, or maybe that was just the sound of my life collapsing. 3 months ago, I was Mrs. Rebecca Chen, wife of David Chen, senior partner at Morrison & Associates. I wore Chanel to charity golf. I drove a Mercedes. I had a cleaning lady who knew exactly how I liked my towels folded. Now, I was nobody, just another broke single mother with $17 in her checking account and a maxed-out credit card I'd opened secretly to buy my daughter's school supplies. Mummy, Emma's voice cut through my spiral. She stood in the hallway, her Spider-Man backpack dwarfing her 7-year-old frame. Those enormous brown eyes, David's eyes, looking up at me with the kind of trust I wasn't sure I deserved anymore. Are we going to Grandma's house again? Would you stay with someone who had nothing left to give? Or would you fight back? I met David Chen on a rainy Tuesday in October. 11 years ago. I was a paralegal at Morrison & Associates, drowning in student loans and surviving on vending machine coffee. He was the golden boy Harvard Law. Brilliant smile. Tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When he stopped by my desk that first time, asking if I could help him find a missing file, I remember thinking he smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. You're Rebecca, right? He'd leaned against my cubicle, all casual confidence. I've seen you around. You're always here late. Student loans don't pay themselves, I'd said, not looking up from my keyboard. He laughed. I like that work ethic. That's rare. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married in a ceremony his mother planned down to the ivory napkin rings. I wore Vera Wang. We honeymooned in Santorini. In every photo, I'm smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. But here's what the photos don't show. The way David would correct my grammar at dinner parties. How he'd introduce me as my wife but never by name. The slow, creeping realization that I'd stopped working not because we'd agreed I should focus on Emma, but because David had simply, decided. You don't need to work, Beck, he'd said, closing my laptop one evening. It's embarrassing. Partners' wives don't work. They volunteer. They lunch. They support their husbands' careers. I'd given up my paralegal position, then my friends who weren't on our level. Then, piece by piece, myself. By the time Emma was born, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday, not handed to me, not discussed. Just there, on the kitchen counter, next to my coffee mug and a post-it note that read, "Took the Mercedes. Don't wait up." My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers twice before I could focus on the words. Irreconcilable differences. Petitioner requests full physical custody of minor child. Respondent to vacate marital residence within 30 days. I called him 17 times. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Then a text. My lawyer will be in touch. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The hearing was worse than I'd imagined. David's attorney, his colleague, was a shark in Louboutins named Patricia. Yee. She stood in that courtroom like she owned it, heels clicking against marble, and destroyed me. Mrs. Chen has no employment history for the past 8 years. Mrs. Chen has no independent income. Mrs. Chen has demonstrated an inability to provide stable housing. I wanted to scream. He made me quit my job. He controlled every dollar. He isolated me. But my court-appointed lawyer, a tired woman named Susan, who was juggling 40 other cases, barely put up a fight. The judge, a gray-haired man who looked at me like I was a burden on the system, awarded David primary custody. I got Emma every other weekend and Wednesday evenings, supervised, until I could demonstrate financial stability. How do you prove stability when someone's taken everything? David walked out of that courtroom with his lawyer, laughing about something, actually laughing, and I stood there, alone, holding a folder full of papers that said I'd lost my daughter. My mother's house smelled like jasmine and old books. She'd died 2 years ago peacefully, in her sleep, the kind of death everyone hopes for, and I'd been too consumed with being David's perfect wife to properly grieve. The house had sat empty since then, a time capsule of her life that I couldn't bear to dismantle. But now, with Emma at David's for the week and the eviction deadline looming, I had nowhere else to go. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, running my fingers over her things, her reading chair by the window, her collection of porcelain birds, the framed photo of us at my college graduation, both of us grinning, her hand on my shoulder like an anchor. You're stronger than you know, Becca, she used to say. You just haven't needed that strength yet. I was in her bedroom, packing her clothes into donation boxes. When I found it, the safe was hidden behind a loose panel in her closet, tucked under a floorboard so cleverly I nearly missed it. Small, fireproof, with a digital keypad that blinked red in the dim light. My heart hammered. I tried her birthday. Nothing. My birthday. Nothing. Then, on a hunch, my college graduation date. The lock clicked green dot inside. There were 3 things. A letter, in my mother's handwriting, addressed to me. A USB drive labeled for Rebecca PIN immediately. And a bank statement showing an account balance of $847,000. I stopped breathing. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed your understanding of someone you loved? My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I hope that means you've lived a beautiful life without needing what's inside this safe. But if you're here because you're struggling because someone has taken advantage of your kindness, your trust, your strength, then listen carefully. This money is yours. It's from your grandmother's estate, held in trust and carefully invested. I never told you because I wanted you to build your own life, make your own choices, free from the weight of wealth. But I also knew that if you ever truly needed it, you'd find your way here. The USB drive contains something else information. I spent 30 years as a forensic accountant before I retired. And I learned early that powerful men often hide their sins in spreadsheets. If someone has wronged you, follow the money. The truth is always there. You are stronger than you know. My darling. You always have been. Asterisk all my love. Mom, I read the letter 11 times, then I plugged in the USB drive. What I found made my blood run cold. My mother had been watching. Not interfering, never that, but watching. On the drive were folders. Years of folders. Financial records. Screenshots, PDFs, emails, David's emails, spreadsheets, showing money moved from joint accounts into hidden LLCs. Communication with Patricia Yee, his lawyer, dating back 14 months before he filed for divorce. Strategizing how to minimize asset exposure. Text messages with someone named C that were ... explicit. Timestamped during our anniversary. Dinner last year, my mother had known. Somehow, she'd known. And she'd given me the weapons to fight back. Would you use information like this, or would you let it go? The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Miriam Okafor, the attorney whose name made associates at Morrison and Associates go pale. She was in her 50s, with silver locks and a reputation for destroying men who underestimated her. Your mother was brilliant, Miriam said, spreading the USB drive contents across her conference table. This is airtight. Fraud, hidden assets, perjury in his financial disclosures. He lied to the court about income, about expenses, about everything. Can we get the custody arrangement reversed? She smiled. It wasn't kind. It was predatory. Oh honey, we can do so much more than that. I moved back into my mother's house. I enrolled Emma in the excellent public school 3 blocks away. I started therapy, actual therapy, with a woman named Dr. Park, who taught me that trauma wasn't weakness, and that anger was sometimes the most appropriate response. And I went back to school. Not physically, I couldn't afford the time away from Emma, but online. At night, after she was asleep, I finished my bachelor's degree in accounting, the degree I'd abandoned when David and I got married, when he'd said I didn't need it anymore. Turned out, I needed it desperately. Within 6 months, I landed a job at a small firm specializing in forensic accounting. Ironic, right? I spent my days tracking down hidden assets for divorce cases, following the money trails left by men who thought they were clever. I'd learned from the best. After all, my mother had taught me without ever saying a word. Emma adjusted, slowly, but she adjusted. She loved having her own room at Grandma's house, loved the big backyard with the oak tree perfect for climbing. And slowly, so slowly, I watched the worry fade from her eyes. Mommy, she said one night, curled up next to me during a movie, you seem happy now. I kissed the top of her head. I am, baby, I really am. David noticed the change. How could he not? I showed up to custody exchanges in clean clothes, driving a reliable used Honda. I wasn't crying anymore, wasn't begging. I looked him in the eye when I dropped Emma off, and I smiled. That's when the emails started. You think you're doing so well. Emma cries every night she's with you. I'm concerned about Emma's well-being in your unstable environment. My lawyer thinks we should revisit the custody arrangement. Clearly you're not prioritizing our daughter. Lies, all lies, but calculated ones. Then came the CPS call. Ms. Chen, This is Sandra Morales from Child Protective Services. We've received a complaint regarding your daughter, Emma. My stomach dropped into my shoes. David had reported me for neglect, for leaving Emma home alone, for having an unsafe living environment. All fabrications, but enough to trigger an investigation. The social worker who came to the house was kind, but thorough. She interviewed Emma privately, inspected every room, asked pointed questions about my work schedule, my support system, my mental health. Ms. Chen, she said finally, closing her notebook, I want you to know this complaint appears to be malicious. Your daughter is healthy, happy, and clearly well cared for. I'll be closing this case with no findings. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, but She hesitated. Be careful. Whoever filed this knows how the system works. They're trying to create a paper trail, document everything. I knew exactly who filed it, and I knew he was running scared. Have you ever watched someone panic because they realized you weren't going to stay down? The court date arrived on a crisp October morning. Miriam wore crimson power color. She'd said and I wore navy blue, professional and composed. David sat across the aisle with Patricia Yi, his expression smug, confident he had no idea what was coming. Your Honor, Miriam began, standing with the kind of presence that made the room go quiet. We're here today because Mr. Chen has perpetrated a fraud on this court, on his ex-wife, and on his own daughter. Patricia shot to her feet. Objection. That's inflammatory and sit down, Mizzy. The judge, a different one this time. A woman named Judith Alvarez who looked like she'd seen every trick in the book, didn't even glance her way. Continue, Ms. Okafor. Miriam smiled. Then she pressed play on her laptop. David's voice filled the courtroom. Double quotes, ... Just need to keep her broke long enough that she gives up on custody. Once she's desperate, we can negotiate a full buyout. 20 grand should do it. Patricia's voice and the CPS complaint. David laughing. Insurance. Worst case, it creates doubt. Best case, she loses it before we even get to court. The recording was from a phone call, 14 months ago, before the divorce was even filed. My mother had somehow obtained it. I didn't ask how, and I didn't want to know, and it was perfectly, legally admissible. David's face went white. Miriam wasn't finished. She presented the spreadsheets, the hidden LLCs, the offshore accounts David had denied under oath existed. She showed text messages between David and C, who turned out to be his 25-year-old associate, planning vacations while he claimed poverty in court filings. By the time she was done, David looked like he might be sick. Judge Alvarez removed her glasses. Mr. Chen, do you have anything to say? David opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Patricia, who was frantically whispering with her co-counsel. I can explain, save it. Judge Alvarez's voice could have cut glass. I've seen a lot of things in this courtroom, Mr. Chen, but this is egregious. You committed perjury. You hid assets. You weaponized the child welfare system. And you did it all while claiming to act in your daughter's best interest. She turned to me. Ms. Chen, I'm reversing the previous custody order, effective immediately. You'll have primary physical custody. Mr. Chen will have supervised visitation pending a full evaluation. And Mr. Chen, she turned back to David. I'm referring this matter to the State Bar and the District Attorney's Office for investigation. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down like thunder. David stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and rage. As I walked past him, he grabbed my arm. You bitch, he hissed. You'll regret this. I looked down at his hand, then up at his face, and I smiled the same smile I'd learned from Miriam. No, David, I really won't. Miriam gently removed his hand from my arm. Touch my client again, and we'll add assault to your growing list of problems. We left him standing there, and I've never felt lighter. 2 years later, Emma and I live in my mother's house, her house now. I've repainted her room the exact shade of purple she wanted, and her artwork covers the refrigerator. She's 9 now, thriving in school, captain of her soccer team, and completely beautifully herself. David sees her every other Saturday, supervised by a court-appointed monitor. He lost his partnership at Morrison & Associates after the bar investigation. Last I heard, he's doing contract work for a firm in Jersey. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment, driving a Toyota. I don't take pleasure in his downfall. Not really, but I don't mourn it, either. Me. I'm a senior forensic accountant now at a firm that specializes in high-asset divorce cases. I help other women and men, but mostly women find the money their spouses hid. I follow the paper trails that men like David think are invisible, and I'm good at it. Really good. Dr. Park says, I've completed my hero's journey, that I found my power, faced my dragon, and emerged transformed. I think she's right. But here's what I think about most. My mother knew. She knew David was wrong for me, knew I'd married a man who would try to control me, diminish me, erase me, but she never said a word, never interfered. She just prepared. She left me the tools I'd need to save myself. Sometimes I sit in her reading chair, looking at that photo from my college graduation, and I understand now what she was trying to teach me. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about knowing you can get back up. It's about having the resources, financial, emotional, internal, to fight back when someone tries to keep you down. Emma asked me recently why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. I told her the truth. In 7-year-old terms, sometimes people hurt each other, baby, and when that happens, the kindest thing we can do is make space for everyone to heal. Separately, she thought about that, then nodded. Are you healed, Mommy? I pulled her close. I'm getting there, sweetheart. Every day, I'm getting there. So here's my question for you. If you found out someone you loved had been preparing for your downfall, gathering evidence, waiting for the moment you'd need it most, would you feel betrayed that they didn't warn you, or grateful that they trusted you to save yourself? Because I still don't know the answer.